This is the Westminster Standard Podcast. I'm Ryan Beasy. Welcome. Today I'm joined by teaching elder Matt Cline of the Wisconsin Presbytery. Welcome, Matt.
Yes, it's good to be here, and it is good to be living in northern Wisconsin.
I am glad there are people who feel that way.
I do feel that way.
It's about 30 degrees here in Georgia today, and that is too cold. And there are snow flurries around, and that is too much.
Wow.
So there's probably been snow on the ground for about 2 months up there.
We don't have snow on the ground yet. It's been a pretty seasonable fall, but it won't be too long. We do like it. We like living here. Isn't that? It's the best for us. For us, I'll be clear.
Well, that's just great. So this is your first time on the Westminster Standard Podcast, and hopefully not your last. Although, as I told Martha Dunson a couple of weeks ago, if you do face ecclesiastical charges or particularly investigations, you would not be the first person to be subjected to that because of your appearance on this program. So let's hear about you. How did you come into the PCA to minister in the PCA? Are you a child of the PCA, or are you a former Baptist?
Yep. I am indeed. I was raised by both first-generation converts, and I grew up in the Evangelical Free Church of America.
Okay, yes.
Here in Wisconsin. I'm born and raised in Wisconsin. I met through a campus ministry, a Reformed minister in the RCA at the time while I was in college 20 years ago. And I began to have a lot of my opinions changed. I became a missionary, and how I came to minister in the PCA is while I was in seminary, I met a man named Chris Vogel, and I will only use his name, even though he is innocent. So please send all charges to me, not him, for appearing on this show or bringing me into the PCA. And he was seeking to recruit young men from Wisconsin to help expand and fill pulpits in Wisconsin for the PCA, and especially plant churches here. And over time, he and the Lord convinced me that I should indeed join in the efforts to help expand our denomination in the Midwest, where unfortunately NAPARC churches are very rare. It's actually, it's pretty difficult to find one. They are not common. And so that's why I joined the PCA. And so as we joked about with me being from Wisconsin, right, I am culturally unsouthern in every way. It just so happened the Southern Presbyterians had the right doctrine and ecclesiology, and so I joined out of joyful conviction with all of you.
Well, that is true. It was the Southern Presbyterians who have brought biblical polity and doctrine to its most high flowering.
Yeah.
So where are you ministering now there in the north of Wisconsin?
Yep, I'm at a mission church in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, called Clearwater Presbyterian Church. And so we have been worshiping publicly for over 2 years. And so by God's grace, we have brought many unchurched and dechurched people back to church and have the joy of teaching them the Reformed faith. And it's just a blessing. It's a blessing. I serve with another teaching elder here as we work towards particularization as we do evangelism and teach the word here each Lord's Day. And so it's a joy. I love it. I'm happy. As they say, I love the PCA and I love what I get to do with it. So,
well, and I love the PCA too, even though I don't love snow. But I am a big fan of cheese. So I suppose if we have some common ground, it could be our love of cheese.
We could love cheese. I'd love to bring you some Wisconsin cheese to the General Assembly someday. That would be
yes. And GA is going to be up in Wisconsin in a couple of years, 18 months now, I suppose.
Yes,
maybe
I hope to take you and any other new friends to a Wisconsin supper club, which is a very unique culinary Wisconsin experience. There will be cheese, so at least you'll enjoy that if you get to come. So.
Well, good. Someone once told me that I smell like beef and cheese. So
we'll forgive you up here. It's all right.
Yes. Well, speaking of love for the PCA, you are working with a group called Save the PCA, and
Mhm.
so I think we interacted on the Twitter machine where I pedantically took issue with the hashtag
Yep.
Save the PCA. So. From whom or from what would you say the PCA needs saving at this point?
Yeah. I ask you one question? I actually am really glad you interacted because it got us in connection.
Yeah.
Um, I think that phrasing has bothered people, and I'm not saying you were overly bothered by it, but can you tell me what maybe gets people about that phrasing? Just and then then I'm happy to answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was my podcast, but now you're asking the questions,
Yeah,
and look what has happened here. We
I
have
know.
someone from Wisconsin on, and the turntables
Yep,
have turned, as Michael Scott would say.
that's right.
But yeah, I think it's the word "save" that bothered me. And after some of those Twitter interactions, I think I've probably changed my mind. I see where you're coming from. But this PCA has been saved, and Jesus is the Savior, and it probably is similar to some folks down in Lawrenceville don't like the reference to Lawrenceville as the PCA headquarters because
Mm,
Jesus is the head of the church.
yeah,
So, but I see. I think I see where you're coming from, but yeah, the save kind of got my hackles up,
yeah.
as we say.
No, and I the reason I ask is because I want to because of the project of Save the PCA and because of the aims of it, I want to engage with everyone, of good character. I want to engage, right, real questions. And so, that bothering people I think matters. So where the hashtag comes from, and then I'll talk about what it's actually directed at,
Yeah,
is Michael Foster, who before this I had no contact with, and now I have gotten to know him just a little bit. Um, Began posting some examples of different things that seemed, at least, to provide a credible report that there were constitutional violations when it came to officers in our denomination. So that would be potentially someone unordained doing things in worship that we would seem that our constitution or standards would say the Bible teaches only an ordained person could be, or the issue of functional female officers, which I'm sure we'll come to. And at
yeah.
some point, he just added the hashtag save the PCA. That's what got the attention, and so that's the terms we're stuck with, right? I don't have a
Kinda like
problem.
Federalist and Anti-Federalist. Yeah, the Anti-Federalist didn't pick the name
Yeah,
Anti-Federalist, I'm sure.
that's right. And so I don't have a problem with it. I think even in scriptural terms, the verse I thought of back when this started coming out is in James 5:19 and 20, where he says, "If someone's wandering from the truth and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings him back has saved his soul." Obviously, we don't mean, right, the person correcting the error is their savior. There's only one savior between God and man. There's only one mediator. Obviously, all of the elect, all of God's people in the PCA, their blood was purchased by Jesus Christ, right? We don't need to help him. They don't need my help. We don't need the help of a new website. But what we mean by save the PCA is we have seen in American history, sadly with the main line and other examples, downgrade occur in churches and an egalitarian drift in culture in churches. And so the reason the term save the PCA is the idea is that there are a pretty significant number of examples where non-biblical and non-Presbyterian leadership positions are being created, and it seems many of them are being created to get around the exclusive male ordination to office that we believe is biblical, and it is certainly historically Presbyterian. And so the goal, right, is to save the PCA from the fate of churches where that has become the norm. And so that's what we are, quote unquote, saving the PCA from. That's how they would put it. I also desire, as I mentioned, I'm a part of the PCA purely because of conviction. I have no, long, and I'm so happy for those who do. I have no family, I have no cultural connection to the PCA long term. I want to be part of a Presbyterian and Reformed church that is
Mm.
that really lives out these standards as you said, the best exposition of the Bible and the Reformed faith that history has yet seen. And I truly believe that, and I desire that. I desire to worship and serve that kind of church. And so, my interest in Save the PCA came when I began seeing questions over, could we really even do anything about some of the things that were being talked about here. So that's what the term means. And so I hope if there's anyone like you who at least on the surface was turned off, right? We don't mean we need Michael Foster to save the PCA, this guy from outside. We don't need me. We don't need really, there is value in what we're doing on X, but no, that's not, that's not what at least the intention is. And so if there's anyone else who's, if that terminology prickles them, I hope, right, this helps make it clearer for them.
And as that reference to James 5 would imply, you are trying to save the PCA from those who have wandered from the truth in terms of polity and officership, as you see it, I suppose.
That's right, because I think if there are certain functions that are only for ordained office, and they're being done by other people, women or men in this case, but women obviously is the focus, then yes, that is an error. And everyone recognizes there are certain functions that only officers take. For example, like here's an example, it doesn't matter what your title is, you don't preach the word. We recognize that as a function unique to officers. And so there are other ruling aspects that come with it. And again, these things are outlined for us helpfully in our Book of Church Order, which we have vowed to follow as the way we are going to seek to be faithful to the scripture in these things. And so that's what that, and then so when we diverge from that, that's error. That's error.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable, I suppose. And so this movement was, you say, started by Michael Foster, a former PCA elder, now ministering in an independent congregation. And was this functional female officer report, or what I think I just have started calling the Foster report after it's authored?
Yep.
Was that the first iteration of it, or was it that situation in Potomac Presbytery with the Roman Catholic observing or presiding at the Lord's table? I mean, was that what sort of stimulated this, or is it just two unrelated events that happened by the same person?
Well, yeah, they are related.
Okay.
Because I'm sure as you followed that, and maybe you remember, I watched that, and obviously my initial reaction with everyone else was I'm very sad, and obviously there were problems with how one of our brethren leaving for Rome was handled. Now, again, I think I think M&A, I think people responded to that appropriately, but there was this very strange moment in the video that Michael Foster shared there, and I spoke to my friend Michael Bowman, who is a teaching elder here in Wisconsin. Again, I'll just keep naming people. I hope I don't get any of them in trouble. But there was this moment in that video where they says, and now we're going to have the shepherdesses come up to help distribute communion. And I went, I wonder what's going to come of that. And I being not very connected in the PCA, had no idea that actually was representative of a, not normative, but that wasn't the only time that practice has occurred in our denomination. And so Michael Foster, he began posting other examples like that. And so it just came from it came from the same source. However, other people, now I'll say, I am not officially affiliated with the website. I have no editing power. But as I took interest in this, I conversed with the report's authors. You can actually, I recorded a live stream with both of them where I tried to ask them kind of every reasonable question. And as I talked, right, I believe that they basically found, right, conclusions that are sound, and illustrate a credible problem that we should address
Mm.
as we should, according to our book of church order.
Okay. So you're not, on staff or,
Nope.
an honorary board member you don't have a title,
No, I
as
don't
it
have any
were.
title. I have no title. I have no say. All I know is because obviously one of the concerns was, there have been criticisms. Michael Foster isn't in the PCA. Maybe
Yeah.
he has bad intentions. Maybe he's not a good guy. And guess what? As I've said, I do believe the report has good intentions. As I've talked to Michael Foster and a guy named Jesper, who you can find on Twitter, who's the guy who's really worked to systematize the data. I do think they have good intentions, but before I knew that, what I knew is it didn't matter.
Mhm.
Because when the check engine light comes on in your car, it's no good to just say, "Well, I'm turning the light off. That made me mad." No, we have to if it's coming on because there's an actual potential problem, we need to get that looked at. We
Mm.
need to address that. We need to care. And so, um, because of how they did this report, I almost don't think their motivations matter to them and before the Lord and what kind of relationship we would want with them. But for the information here, that's what, right, it would not matter for.
Hmm. So let's talk about that, the way they did, or their methodology,
Yes.
because yes, of course, motivations matter, and reasons matter, and character counts, and all of the
Mhm.
cliches that you can have, but the facts don't lie.
That's right.
And so, what is their methodology? You are more familiar with that than I am. So,
Yeah.
how did they go about doing this, and what sort of data can be found on this SaveThePCA.com?
Yeah. One, I want to mention, yeah, so you can find they explain their methodology on SaveThePCA.com. Again, if people are worried that their methodology is suspicious, I would actually refer to them to an episode you did recently with Matthew Lee in his article where he walks through the data and explains it. Um, but I would say a person should go to their website, and on the website, basically, they attempted to have what they call a very conservative methodology, and I will actually call a very charitable
Hmm.
methodology. That if there is a question, that it wasn't thrown out, right? They did not assume that every woman listed on any website, oh, this church you know, um, is violating something, violating the scripture, right? So one, all of the data they're using, they of course at this point, and anyone involved with it receives anonymous tips. Hey, this church has done this. They threw out all of that. They have not accepted anyone. All the information has to be backed by something publicly available on a website or on social media. And so they only worked on that, which is maybe the most important thing. Obviously, the difficulty of going through this data is that there are a variety of terms, and you
Hmm.
don't want to count someone who is a church administrator. No one, right? Because again, the question becomes, oh, so women shouldn't do anything. No, no one has an issue with church administrators, all these kinds of things, even the term directors of certain things. They threw all of that out. And the goal was to focus on a very um, narrow data set where the person had a title that would refer to an office, or it was, or even if it was ambiguous, the what was described were, the functions of office, right? So this term like gospel worker, which apparently has become something that happens in a number of churches. These are men and women who have assisted with baptisms, assisted with the Lord's Supper, apparently in some cases are receiving IRS benefits of a ordained worker, right? They qualify in that, but they're not ordained. They are doing that kind of work in the church, right? And so
Well,
that was
can I just interrupt you there? I'm
please
sorry.
do. Yep.
So with that situation of gospel worker, uh, the when I was licensed by Grace Presbytery as a seminarian,
Yeah.
I went and talked to one of my seminary professors and said, "Hey, do you think I can get a housing allowance now because I'm licensed?"
Mhm.
And my seminary professor, who's not a tax person, his counsel was at that time, he said, "Ryan, the civil magistrate has a very sacerdotal view of clergy. And so, since you are not able to administer the sacraments, I would strongly caution you against trying to pursue a housing allowance exemption with your,
Right.
what your, the $300 a week you're getting paid from the church for your stated supply." Uh, but what you just said is that where these people are being commissioned gospel workers, they're pursuing ordination, but an ordination that the PCA wouldn't recognize. Is
They're
that
not ordained, but they
they're
are
not ordained?
eligible for, apparently, some of them are eligible for that tax position. And so, again, it's that these categories are confusing, you
I
know.
see.
Um, and now here's the other important thing about their methodology. All of their data is linked to a archived public website. So if you're like, I don't know if I trust their judgment on this or this church or these things, you can go look yourself and decide, were they wrong? You literally don't have to trust anything they say.
Mhm.
Here's actually how I got in touch with them for the first time. I went and I checked my own presbytery, the Wisconsin presbytery there. And this was a few data sets ago because they update it.
Well, walk
Oh,
me through how you did that. Just and then continue to
uh-huh.
talk. If I wanted to do that, how would I do that here
So
on the?
if you scroll down your website, there are two ways to do it now. You can go and see where there's all presbyteries. You can now choose a presbytery.
So Wisconsin Presbytery, 21 churches,
And so you
and
can see that there is one flagged, and then it tells you what the title is, right? So the title is Women's Leadership Council. And so then we would decide how, right, where we could concern. Now, you can also find the data of what church is that specifically. If you go back to the top and you
okay,
go to the downloads,
downloads.
and there you can download a spreadsheet which they update regularly, and it will send you the information there of, again, you can see what you get. You can get the data sets, right? Um, and if you download the data set, right, it was updated on the 1st, so a week ago. And that will give you a spreadsheet with the names of every PCA church, and it flags what the different kinds of concerns are. Now, a few data sets ago, there was a, a Wisconsin church that said it had deaconesses, and I was surprised by that. And so I went to the church's website of a church in my presbytery, and I noticed they had deacons, and then at the bottom of the page there were deacons assistants listed. And
Hmm.
there were male and female deacons assistants, which you and I both know is fully allowable
Right,
in
right.
our book of church order. So I contacted them not out of like, hey guys, I want to get involved in this. I said, you have an error, because if I'm going to be involved with, and this was before I was involved, if I want to protect the honor of um, church and my presbytery, I'm not just going to call people to the mat. I'm going to defend the honor when I think you are wrong. And so I
Right.
said, hey, these are deacons assistant. There's no title of deaconesses. They don't describe ordaining the deacons assistants. This is an error. And do you know what the response back from the guys working on this report was?
How
Thank
dare
you.
you?
No, it was thank you.
Oh,
Thanks for
wow.
pointing out our error. We'll change it. Currently, the how the data set is updated and changed that you're showing people right now is people are allowed to report errors or changes. And if you ask them to make a change, you submit evidence that there was some error, they update it. It is being manually went through and updated regularly.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they've worked very hard to be very transparent, clear, and thorough. And so I think the data, um, because of that, in cases where we should have concerns of functional female officers, um, those are places that we have credible things that we should act on for the sake of the peace and purity of the church.
So as I look at this Wisconsin data,
Yes.
there's a yes here in two columns on this church in Milwaukee. So when you called them, is that it? That was referring to what?
Yeah.
Let's
It's a
see.
little, the only hard thing is they only have
Other
the,
staff on deacons on website.
and so, yeah. So what you can see is they
Female
list,
deacons.
I'm zooming in so I can see your screen closer.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you can see at the top, right? What we have is
should be a window.
obviously not all of our churches, which is kind of surprising to me, have operational websites, which is
Yeah.
kind of surprising. But on the website, you'll see there are the categories of, do they list their elders on the website? Do they list deacons? Do they list other staff? Is there then something we would describe as functional female elders or deacons, right? Is there, for example, and the two obvious examples of this would be when we use the term shepherdess for women or when we
Yeah.
use the word deaconess, right? Those would be the kinds of titles that would get flagged on the website.
So here we are in Wisconsin, I think,
Yeah. So
and but I don't see now. So the yes that I saw was just other staff on website,
right, right.
deacons on website. It wasn't.
It wasn't. And so this is why, yeah, this is why it takes review. And so the again, the data may have been updated and that there is no in Wisconsin right now. Because again, what the website showed that you showed earlier was that there was a women's leadership council.
Yes.
And so that's a question where, here, let me give you an example of how I personally handle those things and would recommend someone to handle those things when that would be a question. Because if this is like a WIC group, women in the church, who cares, right? A women's committee handling those things. Nope. Nobody is, I don't think anyone has, there is, I wouldn't be waking up and recording a podcast with you if those were the things we were talking about, right? It's the it is the cases where we've learned that there are women who are voted on by the congregation to sit in on elders meetings and represent women there, and have this kind of speaking power in these settings, right? This is where we start to say that the shepherdesses are, or a women's leadership council seems to now be operating with some of the functions of an elder,
Mm.
where they're taking over pastoral roles. That women need pastors too. It's true, but they just need pastors, which the Bible defines as godly, qualified men. And so, um, that would be, and so what we have to do for the sake of peace and purity is call our brothers and ask, what does that mean? When please just tell me, right? Start with questions. We don't want to start with accusations with anyone. We want to start with questions. But we do need to lean into clarity and maybe need to lean into conflict, right? Saying that we might actually have a real difference over what we're doing,
Mm.
depending on what you mean and I mean. And if we can't settle it, this is where we ask the wisdom of the court, of our presbytery, of our general assembly to tell us, is this in line with our faith and practice? Is this in line with the scriptures?
Mm.
And because it's not right? The key is I don't want my preferences governing anyone's church. I
Mm.
don't want I don't want someone else's. I want us to uphold the scriptural teaching as we find it in the Book of Church Order and the Westminster Standards.
So as far as the reliability of the data, you were convinced it was reliable.
Mhm.
There may have been some errors there in coding, and it sounds like they're happy to fix that where it can be confirmed
Yep.
and reviewed. And so then because it's reliable data, you're saying that where there's disagreement or confusion on whether this is appropriate, this is a matter for the church courts.
Absolutely. These are things that I think we should, when we should handle as directly and personally as we can. But I do think if where there are credible, and that's an important word, as you know, where there are credible parts of the data that show us there could be credible instances where there are churches operating where the power, the authority in the church is not being done exclusively through the offices of elder and deacon.
And
And
so,
where there are credible instances where that could be violated for the sake of the peace and purity of the church, for the sake of what we believe, we have to investigate, and we have to seek to correct and come to conclusive answers.
so your hope is that this data set, this information will be used through the church courts, not just as people whining and complaining on social media
Yeah.
and you know, shaking their fists in the air, but your hope is that people will use the church courts. Well, how is that not litigious?
It's a
Isn't it
great
litigious to go to the church courts? Why can't you handle this in a Matthew 18 way and just go to your brother?
yeah. That's absolutely a legitimate question. I will tell you, if all this was going to be was whining on Twitter, you could count me out forever. I would be so uninterested. Right today, I post about this somewhat regularly. If I could simply speak to 200 ruling elders in our denomination who aren't online, who have many busy lives and are working, and I could just talk to them on their lunch break or on Zoom, I would trade ever posting about this publicly again. I
Hmm.
would all I want to do is talk to them because they have great pastoral instincts in general from all the ruling elders I've met, and they have a strong desire to be in a denomination where there's male only ordination. And so they ask, what can we do? How do we do this? Do we need to do this in a Matthew 18 way? Well, one, Matthew 18 says if a brother has if someone has something against you, right? So these aren't personal offenses against me. However, I do think we should not overlook because sometimes I think, use the church courts or say we should go to the courts as a method to actually avoid more simple, direct personal communication because we're afraid of conflict.
Hmm.
And here's what I want. We have to stop being afraid of conflict, whether that's a tense phone call where we address real disagreements. And we aren't just saying at the end, well, who can say, where we're saying this actually might be a matter for the courts. Um, the reason actually I got so concerned about this issue was not the violations. Of course, those concerned me, but it was when I saw the response was, well, what can we do? The Book of Church Order doesn't specifically disallow all of these things. We can't do anything. And I, in that moment, felt that means we are in a constitutional crisis in the PCA. Because what that would mean is the Book of Church Order actually can't protect or give us Presbyterian church government.
Hmm.
Because in that case, at my church plant, why don't I name myself CEO of the church and begin operating as such? Would it?
Doesn't
No
say you
one.
can't.
Again, it doesn't say I can't. But no one would defend me in doing that. No one, I would be brought up on charges if it was revealed Matt Cline is the CEO and I operate that way. Because the Book of Church Order is intended to give us Presbyterian church government. It is intended to communicate that elders and deacons are how Jesus runs the church. And so at times, we have to use the courts. We have to investigate credible violations of these things because we all vowed to do so. That's at the end of the day, I vowed to do so. So now I will. That's all, right? I didn't I don't have much of a choice. And so Twitter might be, you're right, X communicating that way is one way. Certainly, we don't want to be known for whiners and complainers. And we will not accomplish any peace and purity for the church if we don't do something.
Hmm.
If we don't address each other directly, if we don't go to the courts, because even if we change the Book of Church Order, well, I guess we've got to put in the new word. You can't use the word shepherdess. You can't, right? Start adding words. If we aren't going to enforce those things, right? A rule you don't enforce is worse than not having rules, because now we are that's the problem, right? As as J.R. Tolkien says, right, men are better than gates, right? Men who will seek to uphold the standard are better than more rules. And that was why I wanted to get involved, was because I wanted to encourage godly, moderate, and collegial action on all of these issues, in accordance with our Constitution.
So using the Constitution as it's designed,
Yes. Yeah, and so that's
isn't
how we avoid
litigious.
being litigious. Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
that was your other question.
No,
That's
no, that's
how we
fine.
avoid being litigious, right? I am not encouraging us to just flood presbytery courts to make things miserable for them. I'm not encouraging us to go after everyone's tone or make every presbytery investigate, every single church administrator or children's ministry coordinator. I think to actually do this successfully and faithfully, we should only focus on we should use the judgment of clarity. We should only focus on areas where, when you look at this, you go, I can't see another way other than this is a violation of what our Constitution says the scriptures teach on this.
Hmm.
And
And at
so,
that point, so
go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, yeah,
to to interrupt you again,
and so
just
that so my goal aren't cases, right? My
yeah.
goal isn't to file cases. My goal is to correct error. And again, I could be, the reason we need the courts to do that is I can be wrong.
Mm,
I'm not infallible, right? My best judgment, judging with charity and all the wisdom I have, is still in possibly an error. And so the only way to do it is to submit it to the brethren and say, I can't see any other way other than asking for this to be investigated.
yes. And so the courts would be a last resort. It sounds like what you're describing, the way people would use this. And so you would hope, if there's something on there that piques your interest, that you go to the church's website and see
Yep.
what they say.
Yeah.
Is it a women's leadership council, and that just is 21st century WIC,
Right.
women in the church, or is this is a group that is equal in authority to the session, or a bicameral situation where you
Are they
have the
doing the benediction? Are they doing, all these kinds of, are they doing the functions that
yeah.
we believe should be left to elders, right? I until I was ordained, I preached in services, but the pastor that mentored me said, you will not do a benediction in the church until you're ordained. And what a joy at the end of my ordination service when I did the benediction, right?
Mm.
When it was just this, like, the hands have been laid on me, and I am now in this office. And
Pronouncing God's disposition toward his
exactly,
people.
exactly. And what a responsibility, what a pleasure. And because we believe there's such a heavy responsibility given to those who teach, given those who exercise authority, it is unloving for me to put that responsibility on anyone else
Mm.
who has not been trained and examined to do so. To be involved in discipline, to be involved in souls, I have taken vows and said God can hold me accountable for all of those souls and the blood on my hands. It
Mm.
is unkind, and it is me abdicating to give that to someone else.
Wow. Yes. So you've checked the website.
Mhm.
Or you've watched the YouTube video, and
Yep.
you see that there's a woman who looks like she's benedicting, or some women that look like a
They're
group that,
deaconesses. Yeah.
yeah, they're shepherdess, they're co-equal with the elders. Then what do you do? Do you pick up the phone and call, or do you just send a letter to the presbytery under BCO 40-5? How do you hope people proceed? What's your
Yeah.
recommendation?
My recommendation, because I would like to handle things as directly as possible. I would recommend you call, if
So act
and
like a man, right?
act
Don't
like
just
a man. Exactly. Say, brother, I think we have a difference. But again, being clear, I want to ask questions. I want to let you state what you think, what you believe, what you teach, right? What does this mean? I want to state my concern just as clearly, based on what the scripture says here, based on, right, that what the scripture says about authority in the church, based on what our standards say. I think this is wrong. And I'm not telling you, friend, when I call this person, I'm not saying please just change your website.
Mhm.
I don't want you to just not put it on your website. If this reflects something that actually needs to change, I want to encourage you to change it. And if they say we don't see this the same way, then we say, this could be a thing we have to have the courts in our church decide, and telling them that we there are things like how authorities exercised in the church is not just an agree to disagree issue. There are plenty of styles of worship. There are lots of, I love our denomination that we have a defined theology and practice and standards, but our churches have different personalities. I'm okay with that. I am okay that you're in a suit today and I'm not. Right? There are culture and personality, and there are real differences,
Mhm.
and I'm okay with those. And so, but there are principal biblical differences that we cannot just equate, right? I want a big tent, to use that wonderful language. I just want us all to be Presbyterians in that tent. That's what I would like.
And a crucial aspect of being Presbyterian is having elders govern, shepherd
I mean,
the
that's our name,
church.
right? That that Jesus, all of the power Jesus exercises in the church, he does through elders. That's kind of our claim. And that all the elders have, right? We're all equal. There's no hierarchy, ruling, teaching elders, but that it comes through a plurality of elders. And if there are functions for elders, I don't have the right to delegate or abdicate those things to someone else, right? The obvious example that I hope we all agree on is I couldn't say, as the elder in the church, I'm going to delegate this person, this woman, this unordained person to preach. Now, that's a function set aside by the Bible for elders. You know, Making decisions in discipline, function set aside for elders, right? Even how we administer mercy and ministry, those decisions, right, are that those services are done and led by deacons who are
Mm.
qualified and ordained men to that. So that's why when I say I want us to all be Presbyterians, and let me address one kind of objection that comes up, because someone might say, well, so Matt is really strict. Matt's out there, he's saying this crazy thing that elders or there should never be a godly older woman in the church, helping, addressing and discipling a woman. And I go, that's interesting. I don't know how you believe that's the same thing as a woman who we believe needs to go through the same officer training, is voted on by the church, and then is going to sit in on every session meeting, or is called a shepherdess on the website. It's just that those two things are so different, right?
Mhm.
And all the godly women in my church who are like that, do you know what they don't want? They don't want a title. They aren't. We shouldn't seek this was a fascinating thing that a ruling elder who called me to ask me something about this said was, we're supposed to not seek recognition for our works. We're supposed to in humility. And he said, we have so many godly women in our church, serving and training younger women and doing all of these wonderful things. And he said, but they would not be out there seeking recognition. And so again, I'm not condemning, any particular woman, but it is this idea of we are, when we begin creating titles, it becomes strange, it becomes confusing, right? Given our polity. And then it becomes strange at why does every I've always thought it was funny. Churches put their custodian on the website. I mean, I don't know that I don't have a problem with it, but it's like, how many people are like, I got to call this church's custodian? Like they're just kind of like, that's a humble, godly person who's wonderful. And, you know, um, I wouldn't want my face because, I guess my face is on the internet enough now, but um, yeah.
And that's, I think, a very important point. I found it odd. One of the, I don't know if it was a mistake that I made in my first pastorate, but we needed space on the back of the bulletin for something.
Mm,
And previously, their bulletin had included all the names of the elders and deacons, and so the men whom God has called to
yep,
office, and the congregation has voted, recognizing that call and ordained to that office, and the entire women in the church council. Which, so in essence, and this was a very small church in Mississippi. In essence, every single person who was a member of that church and regularly attending was listed on the back of the bulletin.
yeah, yeah,
And so we needed space for something. I don't remember what it was, and so I thought, well, the elders are the elders. They are the ones
yep,
accountable. The deacons, likewise, they are the ones accountable and ministering to encourage the grace of liberality, as our
yep,
Constitution says. But the whole congregation has voted for the elders and the deacons. They haven't voted for the women in the church council.
right,
So that disappeared.
yep,
And there was one lady, Ryan. Why did you take the women off the bulletin?
yeah.
One lady complained, and we actually ended up putting her out of the church later
Oh,
on. But that's another story.
but
But it seems like
yeah,
the
again, when even if there's an issue in our church or someone like even if like say there's a volunteer or someone does something they think is wrong in the church, I actually want them to talk to an elder or me. I don't want you harassing my random volunteers or these people. Like they're if we ask them to do something and they're doing a bad job, it's actually my responsibility, not theirs. And my job is to protect them from any person with a criticism, or whatever else. And so the people that I want you to look to, if you have a question, if you have an issue, an elder, if you have a need, if you have questions about giving or service, I want you to find one of the deacons, right? These are the people that we do hold accountable, and are holding up in those positions. Yeah.
yeah,
But
and
but change is hard. I get it. I'm sorry to the people of Mississippi that you offended, but change is
I
hard.
think
I
it was
know.
just the person. I mean,
A person.
nobody else complained, and everybody else seemed to understand. We need the elders and the deacons because they are the ones holding the congregation accountable. They're accountable for the congregation, but the women in the church council, that that doesn't need to be on the back of the bulletin.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's more who's not actually listed in the bulletin.
Yeah, yeah, that's so funny.
It's funny looking back, but so you hope people use this in a brotherly way. You hope people use this in a constitutional way.
That's right.
And so, what are some of the criticisms that you've heard that you'd like to respond to of this
Mhm.
report? And Matt Lee addresses a number of those in his excellent
Yeah,
article. That it's too specific and it's too general, and he, as a good professor, points out it can't be both.
right.
So, what are some of the criticisms you've heard, or people who have pushed back against you personally that you think we would benefit from hearing how you respond to those?
Yeah, I think again, I already addressed the possible criticism that maybe Michael Foster isn't a good guy. Right? Concerns
He
obviously
is
there
from
were
Ohio, and
yeah, I get it.
does Ohio exist?
That's right. I being from the Midwest will not confirm or deny the existence of Ohio. So that you can let people feel how they will about that. I think the a lot of this, the I have not seen a I'll mention two other criticisms, but let me just say I have not witnessed a super substantive critique of this, right? There's been talk of how well this is inaccurate or a problem, and I again I think they have pursued accuracy as much as they can. And when a church website is out of date, it's kind of they're going only off publicly available things. And so um but what you find is again the other two would be that there would be two things I'd say. this this is basically doxing, or there are bigger problems in the PCA. There are other things we should care about instead of this. And so um I was really confused by the doxing claim as I went to the website, as I followed this, as I thought pretty carefully, and I was trying to figure out where are like the personal addresses and personal phone numbers of just women in the church, right, being listed. And what I realized what it meant was they were talking about links to church websites. And so it's not doxing if it's publicly available information on the internet. That's
So are you saying, just I want to make sure I understand you
please do.
correctly. Are
Please
you
make sure.
saying that the internets are public, like the stuff on the interweb?
Yes. And and what a and what a bizarre thing if your criticism is don't share this thing we put in a live stream or on or someone put on a website publicly. Please don't share that publicly. If you would like, right, you can find my church website, right? Like these things are everything there I have intended to communicate publicly. This is
On on the
on the internet,
interwebs.
to preferably as many people nearby me in the state of Wisconsin as possible. But yes, the things I say in sermons may be heard even by people from Ohio if it exists.
If
It's
it exists.
possible. Um, and the other one is that there are there's always this, well, shouldn't you care about other things instead of this?
Mm.
And the answer actually is I do. I mean, I don't know about everybody else involved in this. This does not consume all of my life, right? What I do is I teach the Bible here. I talk to people outside of the church and I drink beer with my friends in Wisconsin. That is what we spend a lot of our time doing here in this state. And so, but the issue is that this is an actual change we can make. And so what bothers me about that criticism is not that there aren't other things we should care about. There aren't the mission of the church. Again, I'm very invested in our church planning and missions efforts here in the church. That is the top of my mind almost all day. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't care about this, because it is a meaningful and important change we can make. And so it is actually it is a strange objection to say, shouldn't you care about everything? When it's like, well, we can care about this and we can actually make a meaningful impact on it. And so we should.
And I'm not equating the two when I make this comparison, but we've heard the argument against the pro-life position that, well, why don't you just adopt all of those children, or
Yeah.
shouldn't you care about the puppies in the pound?
Mhm.
And it's the same sort of argument, isn't it? That
Yeah.
because you don't care about everything,
Right. Right.
you obviously don't care about this, or you can't be viewed as reliable.
Right. Or that, again, right, someone would be like, well, there are cases, obviously by faith has even reported, some pretty troubling of a pastor being arrested, or there have been troubling cases of abuse in the church, right? Those things happened. Or even the example you mentioned with the man leaving for Rome. But you know what was different about those? And I'm thankful, by the way. This is not me minimizing those things. It was we were all basically in agreement. Like the courts operated completely appropriately in those cases. And I'm so thankful for that. The reason this one, again, these things aren't if we're going to rank the seriousness as a pastor abusing his congregation is worse, but currently our courts work through those things. But right now in our denomination, there are nearly 10% of churches on their publicly listed websites that have women or others in roles that call into question their commitment to our standards.
To our
That's
polity.
to our polity, to how we say right. That's the thing about being Presbyterian. We're not saying this is the rules we picked, right? This is our house rules, right? There are some things like that in the book of church order, right?
60 days to file a complaint, 30 days to
Exactly.
carry it to the next
Yeah,
higher court.
that wasn't written in the New Testament, but that was us trying to apply wise principles. But when we are talking about the functions in worship, in leadership, in discipline, the only two offices that are divinely given for the church in the New Testament, we aren't talking about the house rules, right? We aren't talking about things that, like, if I transferred my ordination to the OPC or another denomination, which, by the way, in case that's what anyone's hoping for, that is not the plan. I will be here until the end. I would need to relearn those things, right? But I wouldn't need to relearn elders and deacons are the offices of the church, right? The functions, what those offices function as. I'd need to learn some wording, and some other things like that. But yeah, these are serious, right? And will only grow. I worried that the peace and purity and the unity I enjoy in the Wisconsin Presbytery, not for my specific presbytery, but I worry the unity will only degrade in our church if we don't act sooner than later. And the fact that I was unaware of these things in the past is on me. And now, as I am aware, I will seek to take all the responsibility for the church that I can. Because that was another interesting one. You should care what's in your local church. Are these problems happening in your local church? If not, these are, shouldn't you just be minding your own business? Because don't you have enough people to care for in your church? And the answer is yes, I do. Just like you, just like any elder, we have plenty of things to care about. But once again, I'm Presbyterian. I made a vow to care for the church beyond. I'm not an independent Baptist. I do believe in connectionalism. And so I have a duty to the church in the state of Wisconsin and to the nation. Now I have much less I have less responsibility or authority in those places, right? Because I share it with many other men. And I'm so thankful for that, because it would be overwhelming if it wasn't the case. And many of them are wiser and better than me. But I have a responsibility to those things too, because I am not a Baptist in my polity. And so those would be a few of the objections.
Yeah, there is a level of concern, and different levels of concern. I remember getting an email from a guy, complaining about something that some college was doing. And he's not a member of a PCA church, and the college isn't a PCA college. I happen to have the president of that college on this program, and he just wanted to let me know that they're doing something that would violate the standards of the PCA. Yeah. And I said, well, I think I responded like 3 weeks after he emailed me, and he was disappointed it took so long. And
sure,
said, well, I have ranges of obligation, right?
That's
First
right.
Presbyterian Church, Tennessee Valley Presbytery, the Presbyterian Church in America, and it sounds like you're trying to balance those obligations as well. That your first priority is your local church, and then your presbytery, but that doesn't mean that the General Assembly level, the wider PCA, isn't of concern to you.
No, it is concern. It is of concern because this is the church that Jesus died for, and so this is we just have to eventually choose. We are not going to get out of this life. As whenever I read Jesus in the Gospels, we are not going to get out of this life without having difficulty in ministry, whether that's conflict, whether that's just difficulty, just feeling burden, right? Like, or something like that. And that's okay, right? It's not bad. It's a joy. But it is our responsibility. And yeah, again, right. I would be, if the response to this podcast is me getting emails from people like, let me show you all these examples of egalitarianism out in the world, I'm going to go, yeah, I sorry, like that is not where I have any say, any authority, or really any interest. Not because maybe those aren't the case. Maybe they are, they are important. But I didn't take vows to those things. I'm not connected to those things. I'm not seeking that when in 15 years, the Presbyterian Church in America is the largest Presbyterian denomination in the country. I want it to be a place where it is faithful to the scripture, true to the Reformed faith, and obedient to the Great Commission. That's what I want it to be known for. You can go there and you will learn the Bible. You will experience biblical polity. You will learn the Reformed faith. You will see people who are planting churches and evangelizing. I want that to be what people, because here in the Midwest, if you say Presbyterian, those are not the kinds of associations people have, because the PCA is quite small and quite a minority here.
Mm. Well said. Thank you, Teaching Elder Matt Cline, for your time and your work to both explain to me Save the PCA as well as to promote these efforts.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I am overjoyed to be in a denomination where I think we have a lot of unity on these things, and I am thankful for many wise elders in knowing how to go forward. And so if I can encourage that, or if someone wants to reach out to me, I'm maybe in your notes or show notes, you can link to my X account or something like that. That's probably the easiest way for someone to get in touch with me.
I was planning on putting your Social Security number
Yeah.
there on the
I mean, if
internet.
it's on
or
the
by-
internet, what can I do?
That's right.
It's interesting you make every guest tell you that before we begin recording, but
But Matt Cline, thank you so much for your time.